This is the Real Footy Podcast. Coming up, the Brisbane Lions are back-to-back premiers after storming over Geelong in a second-half romp at the packed MCG. 21-year-old Will Ashcroft wins his second Norm Smith medal, and his 64-year-old coach, Chris Fagan, writes his name in footy folklore. We'll take a deep look at that game and what it means for the Cats and the AFL. All that and more right after this.
Cameron has a shot. It's raining big moments.
And there's the motorbike, or is that the Snoop Dogg car? I'm not sure, BT, but there's a dance in there as well.
Takes on Jeremy Cameron. That takes some doing. And he is lassoed.
That is the definition of a fingertip tackle. What a grand final moment.
Okay, off to Ashcroft. No way. What is going on?
Brisbane Lions will win back-to-back AFL premierships. Amazing scenes as Brisbane get it done. 47-point victors.
Hello and welcome. My name is Michael Gleeson, and joining me today are Jake, Niall and Marc McGowan. Welcome to you both.
Thanks, Gleeson, Mark. It's well, they're a juggernaut, the Brisbane Lions, and I have to, from the outset, say that my assessment of what would happen was wrong, and like a lot of people. But I was at the qualifying final. It was difficult to go to the qualifying final, cover the qualifying final, and then see with Brisbane who'd had the harder road, banged up players. We find out later that Dunkley was compromised as well, and they did what they did.
They're just a phenomenal footy club. And I think we often were saying that in the lead up about Geelong, and possibly we underestimated what's been going on up north for several years now, 7 years, in fact, like 7 straight years of finals. And what I really found interesting was Chris reflecting on that early finals struggles that they had. You know, we were often talking about how they were having great home and away seasons, and I think they won one of their first 6 finals under Chris Fagan. And now we look at them as this juggernaut, repeatedly making grand finals and now winning 2 in a row. So they've done a great job.
It's a funny thing, that idea of a juggernaut. I mean, even the three-peat team never finished on top. You know, this is a team that could easily, I mean, you know, last year's finals, 7 goals down against GWS to come back and win here, getting smashed in the qualifying final. Yeah, you're right. It was hard, and I couldn't get that memory of the qualifying final out of my mind when I was looking at the game. I think a couple of things that come out of it, though, that you look at in hindsight and say, well, could Dangerfield back up 2 weeks in a row, play that type of game that he played in the prelim final? And the answer is no. Now we know that. Well,
the answer is he didn't.
That's right.
It was funny that it was a joke, though, on grand final eve. It was laughed about. Does he have another one in him?
He was asked at the press conference, and he was sort of a bit affronted by it. And then it was, well, Tom Stewart. You do sort of look at that and go, well, I know that you touched on this in your piece, but that you take Tom Stewart out, you put him back in again. Would that have made the difference?
Not at all. Not at all.
But what would have made the difference if you put him in and you take Harris Andrews out? So the comparable, player missing. That would have an impact on the game.
Yeah, there's no doubt about that. Because the thing about Andrews, Will Ashcroft was in my view, the next best player. But you could debate it. There were even McCluggage could have got it. There's players. It wasn't a clear-cut Norm Smith in my view. But Harris Andrews is structurally. There was a bit of play we were talking about at Gleeson last night where Dangerfield was coming down the wing right in front of where we're in the press box, and he accelerated. He didn't kick it on his left. He chose to kick it on his right, which may not have been the right call, but he's got the pace to get around. I can't remember who the Brisbane player was. But he had a bit of pressure. But he looked up and he could see Harris Andrews patrolling the area close to where he was about to kick it, and he kicked it out on the full. And
Shannon Neal didn't help that situation by leading that way either.
But what I mean was... Yeah. Players like that dominate an area, they force you to go into different directions. So it shapes the game in ways that more than a midfield player sometimes. I think these intercepting defenders are just enormous in how they shape games these days.
Makes Billy Frampton's game look better. And it actually, in a serious way, it does, because you look at it and go, well, he just played a defensive role on him. And for 3/4, he was really good.
Well, it's funny, though. They clearly wanted to try to get Mark Blitzarves to play on him. Like, they were persisting, and it was off and on, but Neil just kept landing on him, and they just couldn't quite make that work. And I think overall that ruck move probably backfired a bit, bringing Reece Stanley in. They started Blitzarves. None of it worked. They were clearly, as I said, they wanted to get him onto Andrews. That didn't work either. Neil struggled. The whole thing didn't work.
Well, I'm loath to criticise Chris Scott for anything he does. Selection tactic, the guy's one of the greatest coaches we've seen, and he knows better than any of us. But my contention, I was surprised that Stanley was picked just on this basis. In the preliminary final, the centre clearances were 20-5 in favour of Geelong over Hawthorn. And I thought it was working. Now, maybe that's got more to do. Chris would probably say that's got more to do with the ground level players and with what Dangerfield could do, because he got about 7 of them or something, didn't he? So, and others, and Smith and Holmes, and, there were things going on, and they tagged, they didn't tag, but they kind of put the clamps on Newcomb. So in this game, there were just too many players. It was like you clamp on this player, but then there's another Ashcroft. You clamp on Neil. Neil's not comes in at Neil coming in at
just before we get on. Like as you say, I mean, you try and clamp on players. What really worked the first time they played was shutting down Hugh McCluggage, and Mullins had him basically the whole game. In this one, they seemed to. I don't quite know why they were doing it, but often you'd get Atkins on him at a stoppage, and then Mullins would go onto him, and it meant that he could get a bit loose of them and find space that he couldn't find in the last game. And I thought he was the best on ground. I thought him just marginally ahead of Ashcroft, but as we said, it was that kind of game where 5 different players. You wouldn't have been surprised if they took the medal, but I felt that they just didn't have that same capacity to shut them down. And then it felt as well that then when they were using both Mullins and Atkins in the centre often, and they just had no one. It meant that they were playing two of their 3 on-ballers were defensive players, which left so much to any offensive-ness, any creativity fell then to either Holmes or Bailey Smith. And Bailey Smith kicked as badly as Zach Bailey. Like, his kicking was horrendous on the day. Turned over the ball over constantly. But they didn't have any creativity in their midfield because they had too many. I felt they had too many defensive players.
I 100% agree with you, and me constantly seeing Bailey Smith starting across half forward. And I look now at the centre bounce attendances, and he got in there 19 times, but Mullen 15 and just didn't have any offensive impact. No. And he did blunt McCluggage to a point below his lofty standards, but McCluggage still got off the chain, did enough to not justify the lack of offensive impact from Mullen, and I think that really hurt them.
Yeah, I think you're right. The thing that I thought was really significant was when Neil came on, and that was the gamble that worked in a selection sense, in that Stanley didn't, but this one did. A game that was in the balance, clearly, scores level at half time. The midfield balance swayed enormously to Brisbane when he came on the ground as well.
Well, yeah, it was a punt, because what they were saying was we're trying to get a really good half out of him. And it was clearly a plan to put him on straight after half-time, and I reckon they would have known that it was probably Marshall that they would sub out.
Yeah.
I haven't asked them yet, but I would say that was the plan. And then it would be, okay, if someone's down, you just have to play longer. And we'll use the bench and we'll give you more rotations. That was clearly where they thought, and you got to say, a gamble that, to say it was more than a jackpot, because it had a big influence, because it was like one player too many for Geelong, wasn't it? If you look at Ashcroft, him, McCluggage, you just look at that and you go, gee, particularly in getting hand on the ball, because Smith and Holmes are really good runners, but they're not inside players.
No. It felt, mentioned to you during that first half, it felt like a game without forward lines. Like, no one could actually have an impact forward of the ball. Jeremy Cameron was doing nothing and then broke his arm. Neil clearly was hopeless. At the other end, Zach Bailey,
beaten by
5 points in the first quarter, and on Arnold Brightus' trajectory, and no one was really. There was no forward that was really having any impact.
No, same with Logan Morris. Absolutely,
same with
he had
Logan
a couple of moments, but certainly wasn't getting much of the footy.
Conversely, it was the defenders. Harris Andrews was doing well. But Jack Henry was good for the Cats. The Cats just had so many of their players. So their best players had down days, and Jeremy Cameron, Paddy Dangerfield had a stinker.
Even Bailey Smith. I
Smith.
think Bailey Smith got the ball, but I don't think his impact was.
Well, he turned
great.
it over so
Yeah,
often.
I don't think he had a great game, and Holmes was pretty good for about a quarter and a half.
I thought he was
their
their best player.
probably for the whole game.
Yeah.
He was pretty good, but I yeah.
Well, they didn't have that many.
Well, Humphreys was good for a
Humphreys
period.
was good.
But
Dempsey was another one.
Dempsey
He kept
yeah.
going. He
Kept
ran
going,
hard.
yeah.
But at the same time, that first half was quite even between him and Archie.
Yeah.
But he did. You look at the end of the day, and he's had a pretty good impact.
But normally, to win, your best players also have to perform on the day, and I think that their best players were the ones that
more so with Geelong because Geelong don't have the depth at the bottom of their team that the Lions have got. I mean, we see there was these players that didn't play for Brisbane. We just got a list here. Jared Berry with the shoulder, he's an automatic. Lincoln McCarthy, Kitty Coleman, who hasn't played for nearly 2 years, once in 2 years. Hipwood, I wouldn't include Doty in this because he's really never played. And Jack Payne is been always selected ahead of Darcy Gardner, who I thought was fantastic.
He was terrific.
He was.
But the fact that they've got players that can step in, they've got Darcy Gardner to step in and do that. Most teams don't have that.
He was playing as a forward when he finally got back in.
Yeah.
I don't think he got in until round 7. And then that first sort of month or so, he was mainly used as a forward. He kicked 4 goals against Melbourne in a losing effort, and you're thinking, geez, he's on the fringes here. And obviously the Jack Payne injury, instead of the misfortune of 12 months ago, he gets a bit of it himself and plays in a flag.
You look then from this and say, okay, what now for each of those teams? And Brisbane's going to bring in Oscar Allen and Sam Draper. And you look at Geelong and they're looking at, well, James Warple. They're keen for Charlie Curnow. I don't think that'll happen. And they're interested in Rowan Marshall if they can winkle him out of there. Which one gets stronger if they can land those deals? Obviously, I'm not including Curnow as a likelihood in that, but if it's Marshall and Warple,
first of all, Brisbane are also going to lose very likely Archie to Adelaide, and they're going to lose Starcevich, probably Starcevich to West Coast, albeit there must be a slight concern about the concussions.
Yeah,
I think with Starcevich, but they'll get some draft return.
Daniel Annabelle will come in.
They'll have to pay for
another
that.
midfielder. He'll be a top 5 pick, and just another ready-made midfielder.
And
that
those
slots in.
comp picks will have to pay for that, won't they?
Mm.
Yes, but of course you'd take a top 5 pick though after winning a flag, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
Well, I think that's one reason I'm not to pump up my own things, but theories or whatever. But in covering this, I felt that this is going to be a result that's going to have political ramifications. I'm not going to say fallout, but the father-son academy thing is going to be discussed a lot. It's too late to get it changed for the Annabelle one, but I think the AFL have to be slightly concerned about that. And Greg Swan, of course, seems to favour, from what I gather, favours people paying more for bids for father-sons or academies.
And just not using as many picks to match a bid.
Yeah,
We've
not
seen
using
in the
these junk
past,
picks.
these
No.
30s
Yeah.
and 40s. Now
So-
it's going to be a lot harder.
Yeah. There'll be more momentum for change, but I think that
Changes are sort of locked in.
well, the changes are sort of locked in, and I think that they're correct in saying just give it a year before you see the new point system with the matching and points attached to the picks that you've got, and see what price clubs have to pay for players under the new point system, and then consider it, because they did look at quarantining the top 10 and then maybe quarantining the first round if a player's of that ability, then you don't have the right to match, but they've held their fire on that just for now.
I think they've mucked it up, because really the Lions, of all the clubs that have had them, including the Bulldogs, including Collingwood, the Lions are the big anomaly, because they got players when they were in the top 4. So they got guns, number 1 draft picks, and Annabelle could be another one in that category, where they're the best team or they're nearly the best team. They've had the best list, in my view, for about 4 years. So they've added these players at the top end of the draft when other teams below them, which is nearly every team, have not had access to those players. And whether they're father-sons or whether they're academy is beside the point. This is what's happening, and the draft is it's a massive anomaly. And as great a club as they have been, which I take Mark's point, this has been a highly assisted dynasty as well. Let's not. In my view, I think they credit Chris Fagan, because they've got 4 sources of players. They've been able to get players from other clubs better than just about anyone bar Geelong, right? So, Kerner, Charlie Cameron,
Danaher.
Neil, of course, Danaher, Dunkley, A-grade players that come in. Well, try to get. I mean, Essendon couldn't get Dunkley. How would they be going there? He'd be their best player nearly. So then they've got the father-sons. They've had the academy, and I know Harris Andrews was a late pick. One of prominent football person picked me up on that and said, "Well, you're saying he was an academy player. He was picked 60 or 61."
Yeah, so others had the right.
To pick him, but I still think it's an advantage to have them under your nose. And the academy, and that's Annabelle and Marshall.
Sam Marshall,
and so is Gallup, wasn't he? Yeah. So that's number 2. Most clubs don't have.
Geelong actually bid on Gallup a year ago.
Yeah, well, they were probably right.
Yeah.
And then they've got the destination thing firing right at the moment. So they've got everything in their favour. And look, they'll be premiership favourites by fair margin. Doesn't mean it'll happen. What do you guys think?
My only take on that, I actually bumped into Dom Ambrosio, the Brisbane list boss, in the rooms last night, and my comment to him was, look, I know a lot of people are going to talk about academies, and I'd certainly take your point, and you'll undoubtedly have an army of people in support of what you're saying. But I think back to the Go Home 5. They very much were not a destination club at that point. You look at the way their medical team has become, a leading light in the competition, and that's why a lot of these players wanted to play for them.
Yep.
Oscar Allen made that same comment on Brownlow night. That was a big part of why he chose to go there. So you look at that. They got it right by picking Chris Fagan after, Lepic and Voss just didn't work. They've got a lot of things right, and they've changed that culture. They've become a very good team. And then I think on top of that, these other advantages have helped. But I think they've done a lot of this themselves.
No, I couldn't agree with you more. What I'm trying to say is I think the father-son thing, because let's not forget Jasper Fletcher. He got 3 votes from Luke Hodge in the Norm Smith panel.
Very good.
He's a very good player. So they've got 3 players that are elite pretty much. From a high position that other clubs couldn't get, and they got it before the prices changed. So it's now they've got sort of grandfathered in, whereas Carlton are going to get Walker, Cody Walker. He starred yesterday in this game, and all these Blues supporters are excited, as they should be.
Yeah,
but they may need to trade Charlie Curnow to pay for him.
Well, they've got Harry Dean coming in as well, who's a surefire top 10 pick.
Yeah, so Carlton, the goalposts are going to shift for Carlton when Brisbane have already got it locked in. But credit to Chris Fagan, because the thing I couldn't have foreseen is the degree to which they would be attractive to Lachie Neale, to Dunkley. Like, who was expecting Dunkley to go to Brisbane after he was flirted with Essendon? So that's where Fagan's presence as a coach is enormous, I think.
Well, Danaher as well. I assumed when Danaher left that he would go to Sydney. The family connection to Sydney as well.
He tried.
Yeah.
12 months earlier.
But, he ends up there. Look, there will be undoubtedly greater momentum for it, because there will be there'll be a lot of jealousy and, look at that. That's the only reason that they're successful. And that's the reason we're not where they are, will be the abiding thing. But I think too readily clubs will lump Northern Academy with father-son. I think they're very different things, serving very different purposes.
Should the bids be
should
the
be
same,
separated. I haven't thought through that as to whether they should be a different. I can't see why you would have 2 different systems of bidding. Yeah. But I think the Northern Academies is a perfectly justifiable thing.
Just for the record, I support the Northern Academies.
Yep.
It's just, this is not about, and I support the father-sons, it's about the price you pay.
Yeah,
that's my contention. But the other thing here is, Gleeson, Mark, what do you think? Again, hobby horse of mine, but the pre-finals bye is something that I think is another thing that comes out of this. Look, the record since this came in is very clear. How many of the qualifying finalists, winners, have made the grand final? How many, I've counted it, but there's quite a lot that haven't. How many of the teams that have been top 4? Now you've got Brisbane have now won 2 premierships, playing 4 games. That's something the theory was, you can't do that. That's too hard.
Yeah.
I've done it twice now.
Well, does that make it better or worse?
Well, I think
is that a bad thing? I mean,
no, but I think it's a discussion. I think it's a discussion because, ironically, Chris Fagan, having been on the other side of this, was one of the pushers for scrapping it.
Well, I think the stronger argument will be to move it to a pre-grand final bye, not a pre-finals bye.
The Stewart rule.
And the Tom Stewart thing, and it'll be, let's allow on the biggest game of the year, those 2 teams that have proven themselves to be the best, to have their best players out there, more likely to have their best players out there, and offer less advantage to the teams that snuck into 8th or 7th You know,
What do you think, Mark?
Yeah, I think you pointed out what Chris Fagan thought. I mean, Chris Scott commented on this as well, and obviously this year he would have loved to have a pre-grand final bye for obvious reasons, which he pointed out himself. But his original thought was that the AFL's decision to bring in the pre-finals bye was flawed. I mean, we all go back to the Ross Lyon bulk resting, and that has just become this, we don't want that happening. But I don't think it's that big of a deal, and I don't know if many coaches would adopt the same Ross Lyon philosophy of just resting 8, 10 players. I think that was an anomaly, and I think I'd almost be open to no buy at all.
No, I'm
I just
not a
don't
buy
think it's
fan.
necessary.
I'm generally not buying.
It's
What
an Americanism.
if
before
they
the
had a
Super Bowl.
buy in about round 20 or 21 or something? The whole comp had a buy, or
Why?
everyone. Well, to be honest, we're talking about 2 seasons because Tasmania coming in.
Yeah.
We assume Tasmania's 2028 if it all goes according to plan, and that will be 2 years of whatever the system is, and then in Tasmania, you'll have a buy every week.
The other thing that is worth remembering with Brisbane, they pick up Logan Morris. Others looked at him and thought,
Oh yeah,
he's 191 centimetres. He's not big enough to be a key.
Not athletic
Not
enough.
athletic enough.
Yep.
And this guy's got 2 flags and, you know, one of the most exciting young forwards in the game. So you can overthink some of these things. Where does it leave Geelong?
yeah. Well, look, I think they had a great year.
Yeah.
I think that they won the flag. I think it's salved a bit by 2022. If they'd not won 22, they'd be in a bit of a funk.
More to the point, does this raise the difference of the team with the hard run in and the team with the soft run in when it came to grand final day? Is that a fair conclusion to draw that they had that soft back end of the season, then got straight to the grand final?
Mm.
I mean, the outcome would suggest it, but I don't know whether that was the cause of the outcome.
I reckon more so than that. Someone who has been involved at Geelong said to me, if this game was played 10 times with the talent on each team, Brisbane would win 7.
Yeah.
And that qualifying final was one of those 3.
Someone at Geelong thought that.
Someone no longer at Geelong.
Okay.
Who's pretty objective about it. Looking at the talent, I mean, we can get very analytical, but in the end, the biggest thing, in my view, in this game is the talent, because Geelong have got Atkins, who's done fantastically well and has been worked up to be a good player from a system and coaching and everything. Brisbane, got Will Ashcroft. So it's a gap. They've got Bailey Smith. To get Bailey Smith and all of the things that come with Bailey Smith, which are many positives for your brand, but also a lot of maintenance and a lot of distraction and a lot of work into getting a lot of coaching, a lot of cajoling to get this guy to be the best player that he can be. They took him as a risk off a knee reconstruction and with his well-documented mental health problems. That's because they don't have the high picks and they didn't have that level of talent of Brisbane. And credit to them for making it work to the degree that they did. But it's hard.
On that, they brought in Jack Martin, also, an experiment, really. Didn't have a bad season, didn't have a good grand final, came on late as the sub. But they're seeking, probably for the same, the reasons you're arguing, trying to find the elite talent from outside, where the normal pathway, and we try and turn someone into a player that they will realise the potential that they've got in a Jack Martin. We'll take a break there. We'll come back with some quick questions.
We're online all the time. Just search Age Real Footy on Facebook or Twitter.
His handball a little fierce. Through came Zorko. Off to Neil. From 50. Lockie Neil. 3 in a row, Brisbane.
Well, welcome back, and straight into some quick questions. Chris Scott said that even when the game was on level pegging, he never felt they had played their game. Did the style of game play into Brisbane's hands, do you think?
Look, if you go back to the qualifying final, Geelong beat them in the contest. But I think if we go back to what Jake was saying earlier, perhaps that was one of those rare occasions that they get up and win that contested battle in the midfield. But either way, the way it developed in that second half, you just look at those weighted numbers we touched on earlier. Smith wasn't always in there. They had to rely on some defensive-minded guys who perhaps weren't as good in there. And you look at the numbers, you can't argue. It clearly became a Brisbane game, and Lachie Neale coming in at halftime had a monstrous impact.
Yeah, well, the clearances are 52-37. And
in Brisbane's favour.
In Brisbane's favour. And
7 of those for Neale.
7 of those for Neale. So his impact, if you said this, Gleeson, his impact was greater in a half than, say, the 30 plus that Bailey Smith got in the whole game.
Absolutely. I had him in the best 5 on the ground.
Yeah. You gave votes?
Yep.
Yep.
I gave him votes.
Well, it was the biggest individual storyline of the game.
Well, the game was the game was level at half time.
Yep.
His introduction to the game was significant in swaying it their way.
Yeah, but just the other thing is that's a lot of stoppages. Like, I don't want to get all technical and geeky here, but this game was played in a more clearance style. And Brisbane kicked 11 goals from stoppages. We're told it's a turnover game, which it generally has been. Look, unbelievable effort.
We'll move on to, was the AFL vindicated by the Snoop Doggy Dog performance at the AFL?
I want you to go first, Gleeson, because I know your view on this. We spoke on this before we jumped on. Go for it.
Well, I think no matter what he did on the day, people, if you like his music, you would have enjoyed his thing. He's still the wrong person to have chosen. This is the league that wanted to, that suspended a player throughout the entire final series for homophobic comments, and we've brought in this guy that's spoken not just in his music, but speaks publicly about homosexuals wouldn't be found in a football team because it's a manly team, and it's just the wrong person, the wrong note from the AFL. They'll tell themselves it was great because people were tapping along to it. It was wrong. Shouldn't have been there.
Do you think, I just make this point, I wonder, and I don't want to get too grassy knoll here, but I wonder whether the notoriety of the performer, Snoop Dogg, was something that they actually knew was going to rile people up, and it created, this is in a very modern, no, I'm just asking the question, whether there was even, or do you think it was just naivety that they, do you think that they embraced the controversy is what I'm saying?
I don't even think they fully thought through where the backlash might be, and the timing of the ranking thing was a disaster in a lot of ways for that. But I just think this is the pool that the AFL's playing in. They get these guys who are no longer, they certainly wouldn't be an option for the Super Bowl, for example.
He was in the Super Bowl a few years ago.
Well, but not at this stage, though. I mean, I don't see him at this stage as that. The Lionel Richies and these sort of guys. I just see that he was there as like an ambassador super fan.
He's playing table tennis and equestrian.
Yeah, doing those sorts of things. I just think this is the pool they're playing in, as in guys who are not quite in their prime anymore, still have a big name, and that's what they were banking on. And my biggest thing on it, though, at the ground, the sound just wasn't great.
No, it was terrible.
I mean, you could barely hear it. I mean, maybe it was a great product on TV, but at the ground, sitting in the media box, I could not make out all of the words and just the echoing, and during the day again wasn't fantastic.
When he started it was better out. I was outside when I first heard it. It was good. And then went up to the press box. It was terrible.
Yeah. The windows were open, so what should have been like it was.
No different. It shouldn't have been any different.
We'll move on and move off the grand final. Who will Zach Merritt, Christian Petrarca and Charlie Curnow be playing for in 2026?
Should or will?
Well, you can take your choice.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I mean, Charlie Curnow, if we start with him, he clearly doesn't want to be at Carlton anymore. But whether the Blues are going to trade him, I think, is the big question. If I'm Carlton, I'm not giving him Curnow.
I don't think Curnow gets traded.
Well, I think it's Sydney, really. Gold Coast don't. Gold Coast could do it more easily, but they'd have to give up. Why would they give up Walter? They're not
grand final sprint winner.
Yeah, well, that sort of didn't, reminded you of his athletic ability.
Those legs are absolutely epic.
Yeah, you don't give up even if he's not as good, you don't give up a 20-year-old for a 28-year-old.
Look how that worked out for West Coast.
Yeah.
I mean,
and Petrarca?
Petrarca, I think, is the most likely of that trio to be somewhere else. Now, where that is, I'm not sure.
Well, the reason Petrarca's probably the best chance is because Petrarca's not tied to one club.
No.
Now, Curnow's are narrow clubs. Petrarca seems open to multiple clubs, and that's the crucial thing, because someone can come to Melbourne with a deal. And it could be a deal involving players, not picks. I think that's one of the crucial differences. You could go almost like for like with an older player and two players that can help Melbourne with speed. That's the sort of thing you could do. Whereas I think it's harder with the others. And Merritt seems to be going well beyond football. It seems to be this is a political decision.
I don't think there's any chance Merritt goes now.
Well, he's only going to one club, which makes it hard, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And that's where Hawthorn could potentially pivot to a Petrarca. You know, I know
Yeah.
they haven't made this a song and dance about that because they very much want it to be Merritt. But if that becomes really obvious that he's not there, they are clearly in that mode now where they want to bring in a top liner just to round off these younger corps in the midfield.
They
would
do.
not
I think
surprise me if
I
it
think
did
it's
at the last minute switch to that.
Merritt's different sort of skill set, quicker, more of a ball carrier than
I get that.
Petrarca.
I get that. But it is still a Petrarca who can be, if you think back to, I know it's 4 years ago, but that 2021 grand final, he still has that dynamism about him. I know he's a different player, but he did still have a runner-up finish in the best and fairest. I think he's very much still got that value across the league that, say, a Clayton Oliver no longer does.
Can I throw one up for the listeners to you, Mark and Gleeson? What do you think will be the biggest storyline of the upcoming trade period?
No. I think
Not the biggest trade, but storyline.
Well, if it's storyline, I think it's just what happens with these three guys.
Yeah.
To be honest, I just don't think anything's beating that, but you just never know. Things pop up in trade period. It's happened mid-trade period before. We've seen Jason Horne-Francis happen the night before trade period a couple of years back, so don't rule anything out, but I think at this stage, if you're talking about storylines purely, it's what happens with these three.
Well, there could be another one with you wrote about it last week, but if Jamie Elliott decides to leave because they've lowballed him during the year, there'll be ramifications for that, I suspect. You know, losing a player that's kicked you nigh on 60 goals and 4 in a prelim final.
I'm talking about the Suns. What we were talking about with the academy guys. They've got 2 of their own coming in. They're probably top 5 picks in Zeke Hewland and Dylan Patterson, who's been compared to Andrew McLeod,
which will fuel the idea of push back on Northern academies.
Just last word on that, for me at least. People have to understand that it's clear that the Northern academies, the Queensland academies, are potent. Sydney has had some big successes, but it's not firing as much as it did. The Giants Academy is negligible. So that the Queensland is where this is happening, really. So we put them all together, but they're not all the same.
No, they're not. Agreed.
Yeah, I think that it's an easy argument back for the AFL to just also talk about, well, we do it for a reason, and we're actually seeing the results. You've got a team now that's won a second flag. You've got a team that's won its first final. The growth of the people in the game. The reason that these academies are good is because more kids are playing the game up there and getting involved in it and being fostered to the elite level. That's what the intention was, and that's what they needed.
And the side point on that never really comes up is part of the reason for the academy is that the Victorian clubs always have, obviously we know they get a huge number of players drafted each year coming from Victoria. So you get those guys coming back from non-Victorian clubs. The Queensland clubs don't have that.
No.
They don't have that. So part of what the academy was supposed to do was to offset that a little bit as well.
All right, final question. As we sit here now, who wins next year's flag?
I'm going to be boring here, Glees. It's pretty obvious. You can't bet against Brisbane Lions right now.
Yeah, I've tipped them the last 2 years, so why would I change? And they're better.
Because 3 is really hard to win.
3 is really hard to win. Look, I just say this, the team, maybe the better question is who's best placed to challenge Brisbane or knock them off or be the other than Brisbane. Take Brisbane out. Hawthorn.
Yeah.
I'm going to assume they're going to get someone. Whether it's Merritt or whether it's Petrarca or whoever it is, they look like a club that will not sit still until they get midfield help. And if they get Will Day back, they're a team that has the best days in front of them, I think.
Really sturdy defence as well now.
Yep.
They've got a lot of ticks, don't they?
Yeah, it is a bit of a premature question because we really don't know what's going to happen in the next bit of the trade period, which could reshape your thinking on if Geelong turned around and did land Charlie Curnow, you may well be thinking, they've got one more left.
And Adelaide might be better for this year's finals experience too.
I think Gold Coast will also be significant. They'll be better.
Yeah, great.
They look like they can be a top 4 team next year. That is all we've got time for this episode and for this season now. Thanks to you both for joining us. Thanks also to Channel 7 for the audio we've used in this episode. If you'd like to get in touch, you can do so via email, realfootypod@theage.com.au. Don't forget to subscribe, rate and review wherever you get your podcasts. The Real Footy Podcast only takes a short break. We will be back in a little over a week to provide daily updates during the AFL trade period. So look out for that. We'll talk to you then.